Hi, this is Casey Miller. Can everybody hear me okay this evening? If you can't, send me a chat and we'll see if we can't take care of it. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we'll give everybody else a couple of more minutes to see if anybody's going to show up late. So we'll wait a few more minutes. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Right now, all of you are muted, but if you have a question or something that you want to say, raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask questions and we can talk, and I'll unmute everybody towards the end so we can have some discussion and all of those good things. So tonight's webinar is about the efficient online instructor. And probably back in April, I was asked by Hannah Miller if I would do one of these training sessions. And at first I was like, well, I don't know what in the world I would give it over. I'm an adjunct professor with the college. I've been with the Art Institute for about 5 years, and I teach the communications classes. And I said, I'm really busy. I work full time and I teach at a local junior college at night, and I also teach online classes for the Art Institute. And she goes, well, maybe because you teach so much and you work full time, maybe you should give a webinar on time management and being an efficient online instructor. So I said, okay, well, if you think that's the perfect theme for me, then I'll go ahead and go that route. And then we got to talking more, and at the time, the full-time company that I work for, we were in the midst of planning a 15K and a 5K race. And it kind of dawned on me during the planning stages of that race that also being an efficient online instructor is kind of the same as you would prepare for a marathon. It's a lot of training in advance. It's a lot of preparation in advance before you actually start running the marathon. And then once you get into your classroom is where you start doing, the bulk of your work and seeing the fruits of all the preparation before. And so tonight's webinar is going to kind of follow some of those same guidelines as what it would take to prepare for like a marathon, if you want to kind of, compare that to what we do as online instructors. So that's kind of how all of this kind of got started. Let me go back. So I don't know about all of you, but sometimes I can get overwhelmed by online teaching just because I have so many other things that go on in my life as far as not only my jobs, but, friends and family obligations. And so I know that's kind of something that we can all relate to. And so I don't know if I will share any earth-shattering information with you tonight, but hopefully I can share something with you that you can take away and apply to your future classes that maybe will make online teaching seem less overwhelming. So the way this training is set up is, like I said, you want to think of online teaching as maybe training for a marathon. You don't wake up one morning and decide, okay, I'm going to run 26 miles. And you don't wake up one morning and decide, okay, I'm going to try to address every student's need at this point in time and try to get it all done as soon as possible. Otherwise, you just kind of feel overwhelmed, and you kind of have to break it down into steps so that way it kind of becomes a more manageable task. And so the issues that we will cover through the course of this training will be obviously training, preparation, having a positive attitude, and efficiency, and what are some obstacles that we can encounter when it comes to online teaching. And hopefully at the end, we will all have things that we can share with one another and best practices to share. So the first thing we're going to talk about is training. And when I say training, I mean as far as if you want to compare getting ready for an online teaching class as it compares to training for a marathon. And the same rules apply. You want to know your limits. Whenever you start training for a marathon or any type of running activity, whether it's a 5K or a 10K or a 15K, you want to know what your limits are. When it comes to online teaching, you want to know what can trigger you whenever it comes to stress. You want to know what time management tricks work for you. You want to think about how you should organize your day, and you want to think about setting your workplace up for success. When it comes to things that trigger your stress, at this stage of our lives, we probably all know what can make us more stressed out with some things rather than other events. And so for me, this week I've had a meeting almost every single day, twice a day with my full-time job. And I've also been trying to get ready for this webinar. And so between all the meetings I've had at my full-time job and trying to get ready for this webinar, I felt like, how ironic is it that I'm giving a webinar on Thursday night about, being better with time management and being an efficient online instructor, and I'm stressed out about time. And so, you kind of want to know what things stress you out and try to either avoid those things, which is hard to do in life, I realize, or try to find a way to manage those things. Also, what time management tricks work for you? Kind of think about what best times of the day do you think that you are most productive, and try to apply those times of the day to your online classes. So that way you're getting you're most productive during that time of the day, and that way you're able to address all of the needs of your students during that time of the day. Also, organize your day properly. If you know that you're really busy in the mornings and really busy in the evenings, of course it makes the most sense to try to get into your online classes in the afternoon. I struggle with trying to be in the classroom all of the time. That seems to be where I get caught up, because I find that I always want to be online, because I feel like I never know when a student is going to want to ask a question, and I want to try to address it as fast as possible. But I know trying to be in the classroom all the time is not good for me either, because it just makes me, more overwhelmed, because I can't be in the classroom all the time. And then what's even worse is when you have students that ask questions in the middle of the night, and you're like, I wish I could help you, but when you ask a question at 3 a.m., it's harder for me to help you than if you were to ask a question in the middle of the day when I was more available to you. So I try to organize my day to where I feel like I'm most productive, but also when I see the most activity from my students, so that way I can be online when they are, to try to help them with any concerns they might have. And then also setting your workspace up for success. And that one is basically just a matter of try to put yourself somewhere where you're free of distractions, free of maybe phone calls, the television, children, whatever it might be that might keep you from what might possibly be an hour's worth of work in the classroom and turning that into 2 hours because you kind of get distracted by other things. And again, I know all of these things are hard to do because we have children and family and other interruptions that keep us from being able to basically block ourselves off from the world anymore. If you own a smartphone, it's incredibly hard to just not be noticed and to not get found anymore, because everybody knows where you are at almost any time of the day. So I understand all of these things are things that in this day and age are harder and harder to do. But these are things that I do that kind of help me whenever I approach my online classes. So the next thing we're going to talk about is preparation and things to do before the class starts. The first thing I have noted is to review your notes. And by that I mean you want to think of it as when you start training, again, for any type of running activity, most of the pros will tell you to keep a running log, to write down how many miles you ran that day and to talk about how you felt when you run that day. And if you think about that in terms of teaching, especially online classes, at the end of every semester and sometimes during the semester, I will think about what things occurred during the class and what worked and what didn't work. And I just keep like an ongoing Word document as far as a list of things that have worked for me over the past. And so that way I go into every class knowing, okay, this is probably what's going to happen. And if this happens, I kind of have a set of answers to provide to students for concerns they might have. I also post in my homepage of my classroom, I post kind of what you might call a facts, answer, and questions little post, because I teach the communication classes and they have to turn in speeches every week, and they have to record their speeches and upload them to the classroom. And I'll always get a ton of questions about why won't my speech post, or why can't I see the other students' speeches? And so I've kind of come up with a list to answers to those questions. So that way, if they do have those questions at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm not in the classroom to help them, hopefully they will be able to find that facts, answers, and questions post in the classroom and kind of get some clarity when they're either trying to upload their speeches or watch other speeches, because it might be in the middle of the night that the only time they can be online is during that time. So that's just something you might think about doing in the future, is just kind of keep an ongoing teaching log of things that have occurred in the past that have worked for you, things that haven't worked for you, and maybe ongoing problems that students have, so you can address them up front and anticipate what problems you think your students might have. Another thing that I do that really helps is I try to pick 2 or 3 days out of the week, obviously my less busy days, depending on when the assignments are due. And those are the days that I try to spend most of my time in the classroom. So that way, I'm not in the classroom for hours on end every single day of the week. I'm in the classroom almost every day anyway, but I know on the day that the assignments are due, is going to be when there's the most activity in the classroom. And so I try to make it to where I can schedule my days to spend at least, however long it takes to address every single student in the classroom on the days when they have assignments due. And then that way, the rest of the week, you're basically attending to students who turn work in late. And for me, that varies from class to class. I have some classes where everybody's really great about turning work in on time, and you might have 2 or 3 students that turn work in late. Or I might have a class that might have 6 or 7 students who always turn work in late. The good news is for me, I don't know if it's like this for you all, but as the semester or the term progresses, by about the second week, maybe about 3.5 weeks in, I can usually tell, which students are going to be late with their work. And that'll kind of help me even more, because I know if I have 20 students in my class and I've got 15 responses, I pretty much know what's going to be coming down the line and that which students are going to be turning work in late. And so that just leads me back to my point that if you try to make it to where you have 2 or 3 days to where you focus the bulk of your attention onto your students, it can make it to where you're just basically catching up with the other students the rest of the week and cut down on the time that hopefully you're in the classroom. And then also, one of the things that I try to do, and I know other instructors try to do, is to maintain a list of general comments for grading and classroom feedback. I don't know how it works in other classes, but I know for the communication classes, they pretty much have been the same. They change a little bit over the years, but for the most part, they have stayed the same. And so I know kind of up front what the assignments are. I can kind of anticipate what their answers are going to be. And so if you have what the PowerPoint says as a general comments and grading list for your classroom feedback, that'll help you cut down on the time that you're in the classroom having to respond to students and the grading process as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is having a positive attitude. And I know that this might kind of sound cliche and maybe a little campy, but I'm a firm believer of, even though it's an online classroom, the attitude we take into that classroom shows in our responses to our students and shows in the feedback that we give to them. And if we don't have a positive attitude with our students, it can kind of sometimes cut down on the efficiency of learning. And we spend a lot of our time, depending on how they take what we say, they could get upset, they could get angry at us, and then you're having to go back and clarify what you meant. And so then you're having to post double to maybe their answer or to their question if you are maybe short and direct with them, even though you may not mean to be and you don't mean to sound that way. If you're short and direct to them and then they respond back with, I'm sorry I asked that question, or I didn't mean to upset you. And then you have to respond back with, you didn't upset me. I was just answering your question matter-of-factly. But then again, you've just had to go and repost again and take up more of your time trying to clarify your thoughts. And so that's what I mean by having a positive attitude. Again, that you can attribute that to training for a marathon or any type of running event too, because you want to have a positive attitude for that as well. If you think you can't do it, or if you think that you feel overwhelmed, you will be overwhelmed. But the more that you can keep a positive attitude, it will allow you to become less overwhelmed in the teaching process. Also, like I said before, I firmly believe that if we have a positive attitude in the classroom, it creates a more uplifting and better learning experience for our students if they realize that we're just there to help them and that we want to be there to help them in every way possible. And it kind of makes it seem more like, at least in my communication classes, it makes it seem like more of an on-campus class versus an online class. And it kind of creates a closer, bond with the students, and they feel more welcome. So far we've talked about training, preparation, and positive attitude. The next thing we're going to talk about is efficiency. And again, some of these are going to be repetitive, especially if you've been through the first online efficient instructor training. But these are all things that work no matter what. These are tried and true things that have worked for almost every instructor. And so I think that they are worth repeating. I have to move something out of the way, so give me 2 seconds. Okay, so some general time-saving tips that, like I said, have worked for other people in the past, and hopefully you can take away, are to set some time restraints so that you're not working all day. It's like I said earlier in the webinar, I find that especially on the weekends when I'm not at my full-time job, I want to be in the classroom. If I'm at home, I want to be in the classroom. So that way, either I can make sure I'm caught up on as much work as possible, or in case students have a question, especially with the communication classes and the students having to post their video speeches to the classroom. I always find that they always have technical issues, and I want to be in the classroom to try to help them as much as possible, because they have a tendency to start to panic whenever they can't upload their video to the classroom. I experienced that myself, as in I was getting ready for this webinar, and I got online about 6, and I could not remember my password. I had to change my password a couple of days ago. And what did I do? I locked myself out of my account about an hour before this webinar was about to take place. Luckily, I got it all sorted out. But at the same time, it just reminded me of how my students must feel when they have a deadline coming up and they can't get their speeches uploaded. And so because of that, it makes it to where I want to be in the classroom all the time. But again, you want to try to make yourself time restraint so you're not working all day, every day. The best way to do that is to try to focus on small tasks rather than trying to do everything at once. If you have 25 students to respond to, but you only have maybe an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, try to break it up to maybe where you're doing 15 and 15, or I'm sorry, not 25 students. Let's say you had 30 students, and try to make it to where you're doing 15 and 15. And then that way it doesn't feel like you're having to address all 30 students in 1 hour and trying to address all of their needs. I have found that works really well, and it kind of makes it to where you're not in the classroom all day and you don't feel like you're just tied there. Because on the weekends, it's really not beneficial for us to be stuck in the classroom all day, because you want to get out and have some free time to yourself. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. The next thing you want to do is you want to have a mindset to work and get it done. And that kind of goes back to my first slide. You want to know how you work best, and you want to know what that entails. So we all kind of know at this point in our lives if we are a morning person or if we're, a night person. And whatever part of the day that you feel that you are most productive should probably be the time of the day when you are in your online classroom and address your students. So that way you're functioning at your best and you're the most productive that you're going to be for the day. I was looking at a survey that was done in 2001, and it was a survey of almost 2,000 people. And it turns out that 64% of us are morning people, and that only 6.2% of us are not owls, which I kind of found interesting and really didn't expect that. And it turns out that working late is not good for us. And so, again, it's one of those things where we don't have normal working hours because we're online, and you're not stuck to an 8 to 5 job. But the earlier in the day you can get your work done versus it carrying on late into the night, it turns out to be better for you and better for your productivity in the long run. It also said that the overload rate among night owls is significantly higher, 26.7% versus 10.2% of people who are morning people. So the people that tend to want to stay up later are the ones that tend to feel the most overloaded when it comes to work. So I thought that was very interesting. And then the next thing that is on my list of time-saving tips, and again, I've kind of covered this in the beginning, you want to anticipate what your students might need. I don't know how long most of you have been with the school, but you probably have a good feel now for what your students will have problems with, and maybe what kind of questions they might have. And so if you can anticipate what those questions are up front, you can kind of save yourself some time that way as well. Like I said, I post a list of facts, answers, and questions on the home page of my classroom every single term. Sometimes I don't feel that students read it, but I know there has to be a few that do. Sometimes I don't feel that my students read half of the items that I post, and I know that we all kind of probably feel that way. But I feel it's very beneficial to post. I post things such as, if you have problems with your webcam, what you should do. If you have problems uploading your speech, what you should do. I also put things on there about if you can't get the classroom to function as far as you're not able to respond to your peers. I also make it to where even though it's already posted in the classroom, I go ahead and put the number for tech support in there, just because, whenever we get to where we can't seem to make the classroom work and it won't do what we want to do, then we start to panic and we don't look for things like we normally would when everything's going smoothly. Like I said, I just experienced that myself. Whenever I locked myself out of my account, the first thing I did was panic. And even though the number to the help desk was right in front of me, I was like, where is that number? I can't find it anywhere. And then it was right in front of me the entire time. So again, those are all of the things that I've kind of learned and other instructors have passed along to me whenever it comes to some time-saving tips and to help us perform better in the classroom and to better address the needs of the students. All right, and then the last thing we're going to talk about before I kind of open it up to everyone, and hopefully we'll have some things to discuss, are going to be obstacles. And these are obstacles to, being an efficient online instructor. And I think one of the things that most people struggle with is, work-life balance. And I put this little cartoon on here because I thought it was very ironic, especially since we're in the webinar tonight too. It says, "I'm afraid you'll have to stay late tonight. I want you to attend this talk on work-life balance." And the talk tonight obviously isn't about work-life balance, but it's about being an effective online instructor. But I think being an effective online instructor is not so much about what we do in the classroom, but what we do also outside of the classroom. I think it's like a 50-50 balance. You have to be in the classroom to address the needs of your students, but you also have to be out of the classroom and enjoying life and kind of finding some stress relievers to also be an efficient online instructor. Because if you're stressed out or if you're upset or overwhelmed or any of those things, it's all going to carry over into the online classroom, into how we deal with students and how we deal with problems and how we deal with those obstacles whenever they come our way. But most people struggle with a work-life balance. It's hard not to, especially whenever you teach online and you get to work from home. It's hard not to be in the classroom all the time, and it's hard not to be to where you're just working constantly and always wanting to be there to address the needs of your students. And again, in that survey that I read, it said that 41% maintain a good life-work balance, and 11.5 feel overwhelmed very often. So creating a work-life balance is something, again, that we all struggle with. And there's really, there's really no secret, no magic source to what the secret is to creating a work-life balance. For some people, they might go play golf, and then for others, it might be reading. But I think it's very beneficial to everyone, no matter what your profession is, but especially people who work from home, to where you don't have the office and then the home separation, to where it's easier to leave the work at the office if you actually have an office to drive to, versus your home being your office and the work is always there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unmute everybody. So I just wanted to let you guys all know before I did that. Or at least I'm going to try to.
Hello.
Okay, everybody is unmuted. So at this point in the webinar, I just wanted to,
Can I call you back?
if you have your phone on or you're on the phone. At this point in the webinar, I'm going to open it up and see if there's any tips or discussion that you guys want to share to add to, like, some time-saving tips that you have found whenever it comes to being an efficient online instructor. What things have worked for you, and what are those things, and does anybody want to share anything with us tonight?
I like to do a little bit in the mornings, and then I have this to do at night. That's just my tip.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. I have found that it's better for me if I get up in the morning and do it, because then it just feels like I've gotten it out of the way, and then I can kind of move forward with the rest of my day. And then check back in at night to see if there's anything that might have happened over the afternoon, anything pressing. But in the mornings, I like to address it right off the bat, so that way it's out of the way and I can move forward with my day. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to share? Okay. Are there any questions? Well, I'm glad that you all attended tonight, and I hope, like I said, I don't know if I really shared anything earth-shattering with all of you tonight, but hopefully you took something away that you can apply to your future classes, and hopefully, if nothing else, you have learned or have understood my point that, in order to be an efficient online instructor, it comes with, preparation beforehand, kind of learning what you have done in the past and is what has worked and what hasn't worked. And hopefully you can take those things into your future classes. There's always a question at the end as far as how do you get credit for that class or for this class. And, hang on. Let me go back to that. here is the slide concerning how you get faculty development credit for this class. Just go to the website to take the quiz. There's no password needed for the quiz. And if for some reason you have trouble with the quiz, you can contact Hannah or Jesse. But hopefully all of that will go smoothly. Again, if there are any questions, I'll let all of you go for the night. I want to thank you for your attendance, and hopefully, again, you learn something. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. But if you have any questions with the quiz, be sure to reach out to Hannah or Jesse. Thank you, and have a good night.